Hi. Hello, good evening. It's Wednesday, December 10th, 2025, just 10 days before Christmas. I'm Robert Moynihan, and I'm happy to have with me Father Charles Murr from southern Spain. How are you, Father?
And Father Murr is even happier to be with you, Robert. Fine. Everything is good. Everything is good. And how are things in Kazakhstan?
Well, Kazakhstan is a kind of crossroads. If you look at the map of Eurasia, it's almost the exact center. And to the north of us is Siberia, to the south of us is Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then India. To the east of us is China, and then Japan and Indonesia, Mongolia. And to the west are other Turkic countries, and Ukraine, and then Europe. And if you actually could put a compass and point it on this city and make a circle, concentric circles, you would find it's actually the precise center of Eurasia. And the old trade routes, the Silk Road with Tashkent, Samarkand, the camels carrying goods from east to west and west to east, for 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 years, are not too far south of here. And this little town of a few thousand people has become a town of 4 million people. It's called Almaty, and it's backed up against the backside of the Himalaya Mountains as they face Siberia, northern Kazakhstan, and Russia. And so there's
the cities. Is the church alive and well?
The church is very small here. I
would imagine Christians have to be less than 2%, huh?
I would say, no, that's not quite true, because there was Orthodoxy, Russian Orthodoxy. Russia was a kind of took over Kazakhstan 150 years ago. And it was sort of their Wild West here, just like as Siberia was. And the Kazakhs, the Turkmens, the Kyrgyzstan, the Kyrgyz, and the Uzbeks are all pretty similar tribes. They were nomadic tribes. They would be, I would say, 10,000 or 30,000 people with horses and tents, and they would move up and down the sides of these mountains, and they'd go up in the springtime and come down in the winter. And
so the Orthodox have a presence there.
Yeah, there's a huge cathedral. I would say they're probably 40% of the people here, and right 40%? In the center. I think there's a large percentage, but maybe we should call that up, and I'll double check. I have actually. Maybe I'll look at religion in Kazakhstan.
That surprises me. I mean, it's gratifying, but it surprises me.
Yeah, Kazakhstan is a secular country with Islam as the majority religion, and Christianity is the largest minority. Islam is practiced by approximately 70% of the population, while around 17% are Christian.
Well, that's pretty good for a Muslim country.
Yeah, 70. So yes, and there are quite a few women wearing head coverings and partial face coverings, but it's more secular than the Arabic countries are to the south of here. And the people are very nice, wonderful people. I do feel there are many wonderful people in this world, and somehow we get involved in disputes and fights and wars that I wish somehow didn't ever happen.
Well, I find that the majority of people, certainly the majority of people that I've come in contact with, let me put it that way, all over the world, are good people. They're basically good people. Until you push certain buttons, then, and then they can become unreasonable, which I suppose we all can. Anyway. Well, that's good. That's good. That's good. Tell us, you were going to tell us something about the Holy Father's address this Wednesday in Rome.
Yeah. Yes. The Pope had an audience today in Rome, and he faced the question of reflecting on death, especially in today's world that tends to avoid doing so, to discover the power of Christ's resurrection and thus find a new meaning for our life. You want me to read a couple of passages and you respond to them?
Why don't you? Yes.
And above all, to reflect on it teaches us to choose what we really want to make of our lives, the Pope said. The secret to living authentically is praying so that we understand what truly brings the kingdom of heaven, and letting go of what is superfluous and ties us to passing things, he continued. We must remember that our time on earth prepares us for eternity. This is a whole series that is ending the Jubilee Year of Hope, which was held all throughout 2025, every 25th year. And this will be wrapping up on Epiphany, the first week of January. And these last audiences were on, the theme of his teaching was on the resurrection of Christ and the challenges of the contemporary world. And what he says is that death has become a taboo. The mystery of death has always raised profound questions in human beings, and the desire for life and eternity that we all feel for ourselves and for the people we love makes us see death as a sentence, as a contradiction. And yet, we today, in comparison to the past, when many cultures developed rites linked to the cult of the dead and their journey towards an afterlife, today seem to be treating death in an opposite way. Quote, death is an event to keep at a distance, something to be spoken of in hushed tones to avoid disturbing our sensibilities and our tranquility. This is why many people today avoid visiting cemeteries, he said. And then he made a remark which has to do with this transhumanism. He mentioned many current anthropological views promise imminent immortality and theorize the prolongation of earthly life through technology. That is, to live 120 years, 150 years, 200 years, 500 years. This is a quote. This is the transhuman scenario, which is making its way into the horizon of the challenges of our time, the Pope said. Could death really be defeated by science? But then could science itself guarantee us that a life without death is also a happy life? So do you want to pick up on any of these phrases at all, Father Murr?
Yeah, that's I guess that's interesting what he's saying. Does he before he ends, does he give any sort of a reflection on the church's responsibility for this ignoring death and not taking a good look at it and
a good question. Good.
Does the church have any? Is it just science that's against this, or is it the very church herself not speaking?
Yeah, so you're putting your finger as usual right into the source of the wound, and
Well,
that is that the church for decades has emphasized the action during life and the action for social justice, and it's really left aside the eternal question.
I don't know if I think we've lost Robert. If that's the case, I'm going to try to continue alone, I guess, for a little bit until he gets reconnected. My question to Pope Leo, as it was to Pope Francis, is, oh, here comes Robert. He's back again, I think. Yes, you're back with us, Robert. Okay. You disconnected. You took a small vacation for a moment there, and I was trying to maintain this on my own. I'm very glad you're back. Go ahead, continue.
The four last questions have been not asked so much by the church for half a century, and we focused on social concerns. And therefore, the church has a responsibility and probably should get back into the business of metaphysics. And it has a responsibility for people not wanting even to think about death and not wanting to go to a cemetery, not wanting to have a funeral. And you're the one who often has the most commonsensical approach to these things. It's a kind of a double approach, I suppose. The church should change, and then the church should make a critique of what the secular society is doing.
Yes, because we can't control the secular society. We can influence it. We can influence by being the church that we're supposed to be, by being the church, the people of God that we were called to be. By doing that, we can influence the rest of society, but we can't control it. It's out of control. That's part of its nature. Its nature is not to be controlled. It is itself. It is itself uncontrollable. But as you just mentioned, too, for the last 60 years, 50 at least, the church has been silent in her confusion on this whole thing. And it shouldn't be. But last week, did we or did we not talk about cremation?
Well, I don't think we
did. Were we
did.
talking about that a little bit, or was it with the week before?
We might have mentioned it, but we were cut off last week and also half of the prior week. So,
all right, well, let me continue on that, because there's a real connection. I really see a connection here. More and more people are, when they die, are asking to be cremated rather than buried. All right. The church was against this for the longest time for some very simple reasons. Not because without a buried body, there is no resurrection. That's not the reason, because we've had people through the centuries who have died at sea. We've had people who have died in fires. We've had people who disappear, whose body can't be found. Nobody's saying that they're condemned or they're not going to be part of the resurrection because we can't find their body. But the point was that when people died, they were not to be cremated, because cremation belonged to, in great part, to the pagans and to secret societies, such as the Masons, the Freemasons, and societies that negated the resurrection of the dead, the resurrection of the body. So to negate that, they used cremation as a sort of insult to the Catholic Church, and also an affirmation that there was no resurrection of the body. Therefore, the church insisted on burial and to stay away from cremation. Now, today things have changed. For example, my mother died in New York. Her remains were cremated in New York, and I brought them to St. Paul to be interred with my father's remains. Simply because it was just simpler. It was just easier rather than traveling with a coffin and all of this and all of that, especially people who die overseas. There are all sorts of health things that have to be done before the body can get back in a coffin. So cremation is a solution for many people. However, there used to be, and there still are, common sense dictates that there still are regulations for cremation. For example, the person's cremated remains remain intact, all in one container, in one urn. That they be buried or interred in consecrated ground. This is common sense. What began to happen was that people, excuse me for saying it, but for really stupid and non-thinking reasons, would start spreading these ashes. They'd go to a mountaintop or to a place that was favorite place for the person, or back to Ireland or to France or something, and spread the ashes of the deceased. There were many incredible stories of winds taking the ashes back and blowing it in everyone's face, all these ashes. We've heard those things too. But then something else started happening. They started dividing the ashes. Here's some for my brother so and so. Here's some for my sister that, and they can take them home and do what they want with them. This is absurd. This is absurd. As a matter of fact, Robert, I've got to tell you this. This has happened to me on more than one occasion, but on one occasion particularly, a friend, I walked into their home, hung up my coat in the closet, and there was an urn in the closet. Mm-hmm. And I questioned, I said, what is the, oh, those are my mother's ashes. We haven't gotten around to burying or to bring them to the cemetery. I said, your mother died 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you've moved twice since. Well, yes, well, Well, no, I don't know. This is incredible. What a lack of respect. Anyway, this is what was happening in the secular world. Oh, let me not forget. Some people would take ashes and have jewelry made of them, so they could wear the ashes of their dead ones around their neck. All of this garbage, and it is garbage, which maybe it's not meant to show disrespect for the resurrection of the body. Maybe that's not the cause of it. That's not the reason that people are doing it. But in fact, it does. It does show a deep disrespect, lack of concern for the resurrection of the body and belief in it. Now, what really threw me, I've been trying to correct people on this since cremation became a more common practice among Catholics. But what really threw me was a document from Cardinal Tucci Fernandez out of the Vatican, saying that all of these things that I just mentioned could be done. You can divide up the ashes among 15 people or 2 people or 3 people, whatever it is. You can spread the ashes off on a mountaintop. You can do this. You can do that. This is incredible. This is incredible. I don't know that he said you can make jewelry out of the ashes, but I wouldn't doubt it. Maybe it just didn't occur to him to put that in the document. What we're showing the world is we're not going to lead a way to understanding, a respect for our dead. We're not going to lead the way in presenting a mode of action, a correct way of being as a Catholic for the respect of our dead and for the resurrection, the belief in the resurrection of the dead. We're not going to do that. We're going to go the way of the world. Well, how in the world are we to change the way the world thinks if we're right along with the world? And this brings us back to synodality. It needs to be mentioned because that's exactly where we're going. We are following the world. We're following the world. And we can't do that. We simply cannot do that. We can't do that and be Christ's church. We can't do that and be the church of Jesus Christ. This makes no sense. We are not supposed to be going the way of the world, not supposed to be going the way of all flesh. We're supposed to be different. We're supposed to be holy. We're supposed to have an example, to show an example to an incredulous world. We're supposed to be a light. We're not supposed to further the darkness of the world. There I said it.
Okay. So many responses. I would say part of my thinking always stemmed from the fact that when I was little, I went to several funerals of my grandparents, and they were buried in a local cemetery. There was a stone put there. Their name was on the stone, and their mortal remains were in one place. They weren't scattered. And then when I went to Rome, I found that the early Christians had actually taken the bodies that had been tortured and executed of their Christian brothers and sisters. They bathed those bodies, they anointed them with oil, and they placed them in tombs. And they placed them in the catacombs. And they showed a certain respect for the lifeless body that had been animated for the time of life by the soul, which had been breathed into and created in the flesh in this dust, which is the case. We are dust, but we have something else in us, which is like it's a mystery, I suppose we would say, Father. It's all of the functions of the body and the mind together, and then something more that goes beyond all of it, which we call the soul. And those, it's always been our belief that there's an aspect of that which doesn't die and it remains forever.
Right.
And so the respect for the body is as the respect for the vehicle of the soul, the container. And the treasure we have is this body. In this body, this weak and fallible and suffering body, and sometimes sick and dying body, is this personhood, which is very similar to being a soul, which means having the ability to choose, to have free will, to love. This is unique in the universe, and it reflects the very nature of God. You can reflect more deeply on these questions, I'm sure.
Well, let me give you an example that I think a lot of people, especially in our audience, can follow and understand and sympathize with. At death, the soul separates from the body. The soul is immortal. The body is mortal. However, we still pay respect to the body because there's a sacredness about it. It housed a soul. It housed a soul that we loved. The soul of our mother, of our father, of our grandparents, uncles, of our children. So it's special. It's the same kind of example. Let me give you this example. I see more and more photographs of churches, especially in the Netherlands, but also in the United States of America and in Canada. Churches that were sold by the local bishops. Parish churches they closed and sold and have now been converted into bars and discotheques and restaurants. And actually one of them was a strip club, a church. Now, the Blessed Sacrament is not there. I would hope, but I'm not sure of this anymore, but I would hope that the altar was taken out, the main altar. I would hope that the relics of the saints that were in the altar were taken out and in all reverence. But I'm not even sure they were. I don't think many of our bishops even care about those things. However, knowing that understanding the Blessed Sacrament is no longer there and no religious services have taken place, the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass has not been offered in that place for years, it hurts me to see that. It hurts me to see that because it's a desecration of a place, just as a body that has no soul. It would hurt me to see the body of a loved one mistreated. It hurts me to see a church that has no Blessed Sacrament and the presence of the sacraments in it mistreated. There's something wrong. So we give these people, and we give these churches, these edifices, respect. We show them respect out of a sign for the soul that's no longer there, out of a sign for the Blessed Sacrament, which is no longer there. But they're still sacred. And if we're going to change the way the world looks upon life and death, we better get our act together pretty darn soon. We've got to stop this.
Okay.
We have to be a countersign to the world. That's much my point. Not go along with it.
Well, you've said very important things. I've said this probably 5 or 10 times over the years, but I can say it again. If you have a secular age, it means it's not a sacred age. The secular is the opposite of the sacred. The sacred is what is set apart as a sanctuary in the middle of the secular world. It's a shrine, it's a chapel, it's a sanctuary, and all of the words, the sacred or sanctuary starts with S-A-N-C-T, sanct, sanctus, holy. The Latin is sanctus,
and
sanctus,
holy,
sanctus,
Robert,
thrice.
and that sanctus, holy, means separate. It means separated, apart from the world, apart from the secular, apart from the spirit of the world. Right?
And yes, and the entire message of the church and the church fathers, I guess you're trying to be separated from a fly.
I'm trying to separate a fly from my world, and I will give it no burial, believe me.
Okay. I mean, be not conformed to the world was an old phrase that we took quite seriously.
Yes.
And
Yes.
worldliness we regarded as a kind of mistake, a kind of superficial way of looking at things. We were directed always to look for that which is higher, that which is above. This is the title of one of Pope Benedict's books. Look for that. Look for what is above. And Jesus is always saying, if you pile up treasures for yourself in this secular world, where thieves break in and inflation eats everything up again, rather pile up treasure for eternity and live this life in a simple way. And this was always the essence of the moral and pragmatic teaching of the Christian ascetics, the Christian teachers throughout the centuries. Somehow we were lured by the affluent society of the last 100 years to become worldly, and we left behind the sanctuary, what was turned toward eternity,
Yes.
and we were lured away by.
Then we held a council which sought to bring us closer to the world.
Yeah.
Even yet, even closer. So this is where we are. And what I'm saying is that it's really high time to start rethinking a lot of things. If we want to be a sign to the world, we cannot be the same spirit as the world. What kind of a sign is that? What are we giving as a sign? That we're
Right.
with you? No.
Yeah. Okay. And do you realize what day is tomorrow? Well, the 11th of
tomorrow
December.
or the day after tomorrow? Our Lady
Well,
of Guadalupe.
No, I'm sorry. No, I was the 8th of December, which is the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, that
Yes,
the council ended on that day. They had a
yes,
ceremony to
yes.
mark the feast, and then they all went home after 4 years. It was
Let me just say this, Pope John the 23rd wanted to end the council, which he calculated was going to last 3 months, not 3 years, 3 months. He wanted to
4 years.
end with the beatification, if not the canonization, of Pope Pius IX. If you can imagine. If you can imagine.
Yeah.
Who
So
proclaimed the Immaculate Conception. Yeah.
I mean, okay, so we've moved through a series of arguments here to get back to the question that many people are interested in, saying, what are we going to do about the present crisis? But again, we have to set it in context. 1965 is 60 years ago. I was a little boy at that time, and you were also
15
rather
years
young
old.
at that time, Father.
Yep.
So both of us have witnessed this entire period, and both of us have a vague, legitimate, accurate, but not comprehensive memory of the period prior to 1965. And
Yeah.
we know that we've been secularized and horizontalized and, in a sense, oriented towards the laity rather than the clergy, oriented towards the social teachings rather than toward the mystical or sacramental or liturgical teachings. This is kind of ordinary analysis. This is what Pope Benedict repeatedly warned us. He himself may have tried to push some of these things and slowly drew back from them. But now in 2025, exactly 60 years, 2 days ago, the Second Vatican Council ended, and we have to negotiate and understand that all the bishops at that time, who were all bishops trained in the pre-conciliar church, somehow came around to a position of voting in all of these documents, and somehow came around into accepting the Novus Ordo when it was promulgated, and somehow came around under Paul VI to direct the church a little bit out of the fortress church, we might call it, from 1570 to 1970, 400 years from the Council of Trent to just after the Second Vatican Council, 400 years when the church kind of had a wall that secured her teaching, her doctrine, her ritual, and really her sense of identity, and had kind of started to dismantle. And since then, we've had a dismantling process, but we are still able to, you and I and many others are able to remember, and we must somehow use this time and hand on to the future a kind of safety line between what was prior to the council and what's going to come in these new and challenging times right in front of us with AI and the wokeism and all these other things. So this is where you and I often, how do we prepare now? And how are you preparing for Christmas, Father?
Well, that kind of throws me for a loop. What am I preparing for Christmas?
Well, is Christmas the same?
I was
Christmas
following you up until then.
No, I did that on purpose just to kind of enliven your conversation.
To see if I was awake? What?
Yeah, well, is Christmas still celebrated in the same way?
I suppose you would have to answer. I could only answer where.
Well, let me ask you this.
In these last years, I've been to Christmas in Salzburg, Austria, when I was living there. I've been for Christmas in Mexico, Christmas in Italy, Christmas in Spain. They're all different, and thank God, all celebrated religiously yet in those countries I just mentioned. The most important thing is the nativity scene, then the Christmas tree. But the Christmas tree also is given a theological reason for being. a theological explanation for the Christmas tree, the evergreen, and even the ornaments and everything else on it. Religion hasn't been taken out of Christmas. I don't know anymore in the United States. From speaking to Americans, and especially young Americans who come this way, and I get a great chance to meet a lot of people, a lot of very interesting people. But younger people, Robert, they have no clue. They have no clue of anything. Many of them,
Okay,
the majority of the ones that I've met, they have no idea what Christmas means. The incarnation, God become man.
Go through it. Let's go through it as kind of a first or second or third grade catechism, even to remind all of us, what is the reason for Christmas?
To celebrate the great mystery that God became man. That's what Christmas is about. God became one of us. This is what it's about. And unless people are aware of that, I don't know what they're celebrating, except the season.
What was the context that had so long prepared for that event?
Well, Advent. Advent used to be a real season. It used to be its own season.
I understand that, but I'm saying the Jewish people and the whole book of genealogy of Christ in the Gospel of Matthew begins the whole gospel saying back to King David. What was the Jewish people intended? They were supposed to bring a blessing to the nations. They weren't supposed to just be the dominant intellectual or financial power. They were supposed to produce the Virgin Mary, and she was to be the vessel, the kind of ark, to the Ark of the Covenant, a new covenant, a covenant that would be forever and for all people, that the world would become the. Or am I getting off track?
No, you're not getting off track. I think you're missing something, which is the very reason for which God became man, the very reason for which the Blessed Mother was created by her Son and put on earth to receive him. The very reason for all of this was to free us from the slavery of sin. And when I think probably what is confronting the world today, or what the problem with the world today is that there is no sense of sin. There is no real sense of sin. Everything is relative. Morality is relative. Mortal sin. Why would God send you to hell for living together without marriage with a woman or a man? Why would God this? Why would he wouldn't do that? He doesn't care. Well, they don't give any thought to anything happening. So the real idea of sin, sin is being a Nazi. And in hell, there's only one person. That's Adolf Hitler. That's it. Everyone else is free from sin. They don't have sin. It's funny. I remember having this discussion with some people in Rome on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. We were talking about what the Immaculate Conception meant, that Mary was conceived in the womb of Saint Anne without sin. Mary was conceived without sin. Not to confuse it with the virgin birth of Christ, okay? The Immaculate Conception. Why?
Right.
Well, because humanity was in sin. It's that simple. But people understood that then. They don't understand that anymore. What do you mean humanity's in sin? And I remember having this discussion years ago, and just about everyone there, I said, were you conceived in sin? I asked each person. Absolutely not. What a ridiculous thing. What do you mean? Of course not. I wasn't conceived in sin. And I said, then why would you have difficulty believing that the Blessed Mother was conceived without sin? In other words, everyone was conceived without sin except Mary. This is how upside down we have everything because of a lack of teaching for 50 or 60 years, a lack of education, a lack of appreciation, a lack of preaching, Robert, a lack of preaching. We were told many times, or I've been told when I was in parishes, I remember many times people ask after Mass saying to me, usually the men who went to college, older men, they would say, "What college did you teach at?" And I said, "Well, what gives you the idea that I taught at college?" "The way you preach. You preach like a teacher." I said, "Well," I said, "I consider that a compliment." He said, "Well, I meant it as a compliment, right?" Here's the thing. I was corrected by other priests. Stop teaching in your homilies. That's not the purpose of a homily. Homily. Sermons. In a sermon you can teach, but in a homily not. In a homily is supposed to show a different breath, a different spirit, a fellowship, a caritas, a love. It's supposed to go through everything, but not to teach. Well, all right. I didn't pay any attention to it. I kept teaching. But people who would go to my Mass, for example, and other priests that I knew, learned something. And we had to teach because we had no more Catholic schools. There was no more Catholic education. There was no more catechism being taught. And the only place that I could teach it that would get out to a larger group of people was at Sunday Mass. So we would take the Ten Commandments, we'd take these things and explain them. But one of the things that was difficult to explain to people is that they were conceived in original sin. They had forgotten completely. And I said, well, what do you think you're doing in baptism? Why do you bother baptizing a child? Why did you get baptized? Take away original sin. Original sin, what's that? And, oh my Lord. This is where we're at. And I'm simply saying this. If the church doesn't get her act together real soon and start teaching, instructing, which is her mission, to instruct the ignorant, this is part of why she's alive, why she's here, the church. We're going to lose, and we're just going to keep losing. We have all of a sudden stopped being in the business of the salvation of souls. We're not saving souls. And this is a tragedy.
Okay. You've touched on a matter here that it's drawn me back to an earlier remark I see over on the side here, someone made a comment praising you and me, and I have to bring attention to it because I think it's in some way improper, at least in regard to me. And it does relate to the fact of original sin. And this is the remark here. I'll put it up on the screen. Bless our saints, Dr. Robert and Fr Murr. I feel like going with the holy apostles on the road to Emmaus. I hope the Lord joins us soon. Now, I recall having a fight with my brother, and I was 2 years older and so 2 years stronger, and he was a very courageous lad, and he didn't always want to submit to me. And sometimes we would wrestle and they would end in little tussles. But one day he said, "You cannot tell me this and I will not accept it." And I said, "Yes, you will." And I got him on his back and I got his hands down. He couldn't move. And then I said, "You have to agree or I'm going to spit on your face." And he said, "No, I'm not going to agree." And so I said, "You will." And here comes the spit. And I started to drop it off of my lips. And therefore, here's a call coming in. But I have committed sins which are harmful to the dignity and integrity of people around me, including my own brother. And if I think I would have been capable under some circumstance. Oh, Fr Murr has left me. Come back. Oh, no. Well, that's interesting. You know what? I think this happened because this telephone call came in. It's connected to my computer, and I just feel we've got to end up the program now. It's come to the end of the hour. But all of us are looking forward toward Christmas. Father Murr is emphasizing the necessity of souls to be recovered from darkness and hopelessness. The church has a message for them, and it's not exactly, it's in what she carries, the message of the gospel, that there is salvation, there is forgiveness, there is eternal life, and therefore we go toward this Christmas bearing these messages, and we try to be worthy to carry these messages. So thank all of you very much. I'm sorry we ended up abruptly losing Father Murr. We'll be back next week. If you wish to come with us next year to meet with Father Murr in southern Spain, that'll be great. And I'm going to try to talk to him about coming up to some other place like Rome, Assisi, or some other place where he would give a retreat, not in southern Spain, but maybe in Italy. So, all best wishes. Have a good Advent, peaceful Advent. Take care of your families as best you can. Reconcile if you can. And a Merry Christmas, Merry end of Advent to all. Thank you.
Come with us on a unique pilgrimage and retreat to renew your spirit. Experience the beauty and richness of southern Spain. Our retreat master, Father Charles T. Murr, a renowned Catholic priest, best-selling author, philosopher, theologian, trained psychologist, and pastor of souls. Father Murr will guide us through 3 mornings of spiritual reflections at a convent located in the historic heart of Carmona, Spain, promising a transformative journey. Experience an intimate evening with Father Murr at his home. Wine, dinner, music, and conversation, a highlight of this unique experience. Explore picturesque towns in Andalusia, each with its own history and charm. From the ancient streets of Carmona to the majestic beauty of Cordoba, the breathtaking views of Ronda, the remarkable village of Centenil, and the historic wonders of Seville. Our pilgrimage will be filled with awe-inspiring moments. Join us on this profound spiritual journey and rediscover the joy of faith, fellowship, and renewal. Book your place now and embark on a pilgrimage and retreat unlike any other.